This is a story about a young man named Sawa, who was born in a refugee camp in 2001. For many years, he and his family lived in fear of the Burmese military. They were always worried about being hurt or killed, not because of anything they did, but simply because they were Karen people, which are an ethnic group that the Burmese military wanted to push off their land. The Karen people refused to leave, though. They had lived on that land for generations, and they fought hard to stay. It was their land, it was their home, and no matter how many times the military attacked, they stayed. After years of living in constant danger, Sawa's family was offered a chance to leave. In 2012, they arrived in St. Paul, Minnesota, hoping for a better life away from the violence. But what they found was both a new opportunity and new challenges. At school, Sawa quickly realized that the challenges weren't over. He didn't know much English, and the lessons were hard to follow. It wasn't just a new language he had to learn. It was an entirely new way of life. His classmates didn't understand his background. They didn't know what it felt like to run from bombs or to leave everything behind. And Sawa couldn't share his story easily because no one around him could speak his language, Karen. At home, things weren't easy either. His parents, who had been through so much, found it difficult to get jobs. The language barrier was a huge challenge. They didn't know how to navigate the American systems, whether it was healthcare, housing, or even just getting groceries. They relied on organizations like the Karen organization in Minnesota for help, but sometimes it still felt like they were lost in a country that didn't understand them. Sawa wasn't alone in his struggle. Many of the Karen youth in St. Paul faced the same challenges. They had to find a way to balance their old life with the new one they were trying to build. They wanted to stay connected to the culture, but they also had to fit into a new world where the traditions and language didn't always have a place. Luckily, things were starting to change. St. Paul Public Schools started offering Karen language classes, something that was never allowed back in Myanmar. But even though these classes helped, there were still too few and too limited. Many students felt stuck between two worlds, trying to keep their culture while also learning a new language and new ways of thinking. And the struggle didn't end in the classroom. Some of Sawa's friends, feeling lost and confused, turned to other groups to fit in. Unfortunately, some found themselves involved in gangs, hoping that would give them the belonging they were missing. But this came with even more challenges: violence, drugs, and crime. Sawa could see how easy it was for his peers to fall into these traps, especially when they didn't have the support they needed to succeed. Despite all these challenges, the Karen community in St. Paul remains strong. There are organizations and community centers working hard to support them. These groups help with things like housing, jobs, and language classes. But even with all these efforts, it's not always enough. The system in America was never set up to help refugees like Sawa's family, and many are still struggling to navigate their new lives. Sawa's story is just one example of the many challenges Karen refugees face in America, but it's also a story of hope. Despite everything, Sawa and his family continue to work hard to make a life here. And as more people learn about the struggles they face, change is starting to happen. Schools are beginning to offer more support, community centers are growing, and voices like Sawa's are starting to be heard.